Are you tired of sluggish app that freeze and frustrate your users and want to make your Flutter app's performance to the next level? I'm here to rescue you. In today's video, we are diving deep into the world of Flutter isolates. You will learn how to harness the power of asynchronous programming to make your app lightning fast and responsive. In today's video, we will going to cover how to efficiently handle API calls and data processing using isolates, and we are also going to optimize our app's performance with multi-isolate architecture. So whether you are a beginner or an experienced Flutter developer, this video will equip you with the knowledge and skills to build high-performance, user-friendly apps. So let's get started. So in today's video, I'm going to use the same project. So I have opened that project. Now come inside the main.dart file, and from here remove this isolate example class, and then here create a new stateful widget as isolate API example. Then call this widget from the my app. So as you know, we are going to call APIs from isolate. So first let's create few variables. So first create a dynamic list, name as data, and initialize this list with empty list. So we will use this list to store the API response. Then create another boolean variable as is loading and initialize it with false value. So we will use this variable to show the loading dialog in our app. Then here create a future method name as fetch data and mark this method as async. So we are going to use this method to call the API. Okay, now let's quickly build the UI. So come inside the build method and here add a center widget, and for its child here add a condition that if is loading equals to true, then show the circular progress indicator. Otherwise add another condition that if data is empty, then we are going to show the elevated button. So here add an elevated button, and for its on pressed call this fetch data method, and for its child add the text widget to fetch data. Now if data is empty, then we will show the button, and if we have data, then we show the list of data. So in the else condition here add the list view.builder, and for its item count here add the data.length. Then from item builder here return the list style. So for its title here add the text widget which will say the ID, and for accessing the ID here add the data then index, and also do the same for subtitle. Now add the key for ID and add the key for subtitle. So in the subtitle we are going to show the title, so add the key accordingly. Now let's move to the interesting part. So come inside this fetch data method, and here first add the set state and make is loading to true. Like whenever this method get called, we are going to show a circular progress indicator. So here make the is loading to true. Then add a try block, and from here we need to call our isolate to get the data. So here create a final variable as data, and then here add await, and let's name our isolate method as fetch data and parse in isolate. Okay, after that once the data is arrived, then we need to assign this data inside this list data. So here add the set state and then assign this data to that data. Then add a catch block, and inside the catch block print the error. Then add the finally statement, so that inside this we are going to make our is loading to false because the data has arrived. So here add the set state and make the is loading to false. Now let's create this method. So here create method as fetch data and parse in isolate, and make sure to mark its return type as future of dynamic list. Then this is a future function, so add the async here. Now we need to create the receive port so that we can establish a communication channel between our main isolate and this spawned isolate, so that this spawn isolate can send the data back to the main isolate. So here create a receive port instance. Now here we need to create a new isolate to offload the API call and JSON parsing. So here add await, then isolate.spawn. Now inside the spawn method we need to specify our function that will run in the new isolate. So here just add a function name as API call and parse isolate, and don't worry, we will create this method in a minute. Then here add the receive port dot send port. So this send port allows the new isolate to send a message back to the main isolate. Now let's quickly create our this API call and parse isolate method. So here add this method, and here add the argument as send port. So we will use this send port to send data back to the main isolate. Okay, then mark this function as async because inside this function we are going to make our API call. Then here create a new variable as URL, and here add the URL of your API. Then create a response variable, And then here first we need to import the HTTP package. So come to the pubspec.yaml file and here add the HTTP package. Then inside this main.dart file, here import the HTTP package. Then here add the await, then it's a get request, so use the get method of this HTTP, and inside this method parse the URL into URI. Then here add a check that if status code is equals to 200. In that case, just decode the response body and here send the data to the main port by adding send port.send and then data. And one more thing which I forgot to mention, in this method we are going to make API call, then it's mandatory to make proper error handling. So wrap this whole code inside a try block, okay? Then come outside of this if condition and here add else condition. So in this case, if the status code is not 200, then we are not receiving any data. So from here we need to send some error or we need to send empty list. So for this video purpose, inside else condition I'm just going to send an empty list. So here just add the send port.send and then add an empty list. Then here add the catch block, and if we are having some error, then again just send an empty list. Okay, so that's it for this method. Now come back to our fetch data and parse in isolate method. So here in this line number 58, we called our isolate and we get the response. Now we need to store our response. So here create another variable as result, then here add await, then receive port dot first. So basically here we are waiting for the spawned isolate to send data back via the send port. So in this line, we are just listen for the first message received on the receive port. Okay, then here add the return statement so that we can return our result to this above method. So here add return, then result as list dynamic. So that's it for the coding part. Now just save the code and run the application so that we can see how our isolate is working. And the app is installed, but here I forget to wrap our center widget inside a scaffold. That is why the background is in black color. And when I tap onto this button, here I'm seeing some error. So just give me a minute, I'll debug the code and let you know what was the error. So here I'm back. I got the issue. Here actually we have created our isolate method inside this widget, and this is not the correct way. So please copy these method and add them outside of this class or outside of any class. Then let's do one more thing. Wrap the center widget inside the scaffold widget and make the background color as white. Now just save the code and run the application. Now if you tap onto this fetch data method, then you can see we have a loading indicator and afterwards we are seeing our data. So this is how you can make API call inside isolate. Now let's do some furthermore advanced thing. Like now we are going to use one isolate for making API call and using another isolate to parse the JSON data. So let's do that. So for doing that, first come over here and here rename this variable to row JSON from data, because we are going to use this isolate to just call the API. So and then here just change the method name to as fetch data in isolate. Then here create another variable and then here add another isolate to pass the JSON data, and inside this isolate pass the row JSON, because we are going to parse this JSON data into a readable format so that our widgets can understand this. Then change the return type of this fetch data in isolate method to the string, because from here we are just going to return the string. Okay, so come inside this return statement and here remove this list dynamic and here add the string method. Then come inside the API call and parse isolate method, and from here copy this parsing line and remove it from here, and then from the send port here just send the response dot body. Okay, then here create another method as parse JSON in isolate. So we are going to use this isolate to parse JSON. Okay, then as the argument for this function here add the row JSON which are in string format, so add that, and then here create a receive port to send back data to the main isolate, so add that, and then here spawn a new isolate and name this method as JSON parse isolate. And now here we need to pass two things to the isolate. First one is the JSON data, which is coming from the API, and second one is the receive port to send data back to the main isolate. So for doing that, here just simply add a list and first pass the raw JSON and then pass the send port. Okay, then create our this JSON parse isolate method, and then here add the parameter as args, and its type is list dynamic. So here first we need to extract our raw JSON from this args parameter. So here create a new variable as row JSON, and then here add the args and then the 0th index and then add string. So this raw JSON will store our JSON value. Then create another variable as send port. So this will going to our send port. So here add that, and then add the try block, and then here create another variable as parse JSON, and inside it here simply add the json.decode and then row JSON. So it will convert our string into list in a readable format. Okay, then here add the its return type like list dynamic, and then using the send port send this data back to the main isolate. Okay, then inside the catch block, if something unusual thing happen, then just send the empty list to the main isolate. Okay, then here create another variable to store this isolates data. So here I have created a pass data variable, and then here add the receive port dot first to get the data, then return this data to the main isolate. Okay, so I think everything is great from my side. Now just save the code and run the application. And now if you tap onto this button, then we are having some error, and the error is string is not a subtype of okay, so here just change this send port index to the 1. Sorry, it's my mistake. Now save the code again and run the application, and now you can see when I tap onto the send port button, then we are having our data. So this is how you can use the multiple isolate in your app to offload heavy task in the background task. Okay, so this is it for this video. If you enjoyed this video, then please give us a thumbs up, and if you have any suggestion for me, then please comment it down below, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.